Okay, welcome back to the Fantasy Labs live podcast. I am Bryan, as always, and I'm here with Justin J. Fan. He is our NBA guy at Fantasy Labs, and this is the one of the videos that we're going to do as NBA season is now officially fully upon us, and we're approaching our first actual full week of every day of games. So we're going to do these videos. We're going to do them on Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday nights, and so it's going to be a live hangout like this. Sunday we'll probably obviously do it during the halftime of the game, so you don't have to choose between us and NFL. So we can do it during halftime and get you back to the game. And Tuesday and Thursday we'll do it probably sometime, after lock for sure, but again, it's going to be for the next day. So we're trying to be able to get you guys information on the big slates on the Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And on top of that, we're going to have short little videos that we're going to actually host on a Twitch account that we're going to give you guys in the next day or two. And so we're going to do short little videos. Justin's going to do a couple that are called Late Night Labs, and he's going to do that on the days we don't have the podcast, where he just kind of goes for 3 or 4 minutes and gives his thoughts on Twitch, and then we'll embed it into a blog post so you can catch it if you didn't. And his quick 3 or 4 minute thoughts on this slate for the next day. So it's kind of sorry we couldn't do a pod every day, but we still want to get you guys. And every day I'm going to do a video around lunchtime. It's called Lunch Lines, where I go through the Vegas lines for the upcoming slate, and then also kind of the news of the day and all that stuff. Justin's always on the news, but I'm going to kind of go over the big things, and then obviously you guys can follow along as we get up to the slate on the Fantasy Labs NBA Twitter account, which has a lot of followers now, and it's exciting. So, yeah. So that's kind of the tentative plan of what we're doing for NBA this year. So lots of videos, lots of podcasts, lots of all stuff. So we're going to get that to you. Obviously, we'll have content and analysis as well. So hope that sounds good to you guys. And thanks for watching, because we get to do these because you guys are interested in them. So thanks. So Justin, how you doing, man?
Pretty good. Glad to see you were allowed to jump on this podcast, given Bale's tentatively fired you like 2 hours ago for making poor life decisions.
Wow. So you're on his side.
Yeah, I'm team Christmas music needs to stay around Christmas season.
Wow. So what's the appropriate time?
I'll give you like a week or two.
So not even after Thanksgiving.
Come on now.
Still early.
Yeah, that's still a little early, Bryan.
See, I thought
that'll get you. I mean, that'll probably get you like a 2-week suspension if you listen to around this time of the year. It gets you a straight out firing. So
it's true. Yeah. So I am rebelling against the company. I'm pulling a Bill Simmons and just being a rebel and doing the podcast despite the fact that I was fired earlier today. So, so that's good stuff. So you wanted to talk quickly. I know you had gotten a bunch of questions about our models and kind of how to use them properly. And obviously that's something that's really important. Like if our projections are really only as good as our models, because if we can't properly show you guys how to do it, then it kind of defeats the purpose. So kind of run through that, Justin, and let me know what sort of questions you got and what you've been thinking about that.
Yeah, I think I'll go over this in depth in a specific video a little later, because I think it you can really delve into the nuances of using our models and how to use them for the contest that you're going to enter, and to set it in a way that kind of fits your needs and gives you what you want. But straight off the top, I think projection-only systems are really flawed in general. Just if you go to a site that just gives you straight projections, that doesn't really tell you what you want to know, because in DFS, it's really all about range of outcomes. And you want to know, kind of guys' percentages of outcomes, and, what's his floor, what's his ceiling, is he GPP or cash game friendly, which tournament, which contest you should use them in. And I think, people look at straight things like projections, and, if a guy, puts up 45 DraftKings points and costs 10K, then that's not really an optimal play. So what we really do is emphasize our, projected points per dollar, and you can use the sliders to really emphasize floor, emphasize ceiling, consistency, and all the kind of things you want to give you the best results that you need for your specific contest. So I'll dive into that, a little bit more in depth later, but that's kind of just like general thoughts about how to use our models.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that the models don't optimize the projections; they optimize the ratings, which is kind of on you. Obviously you can just pull up any of the pro models, and that's fine, and you can just use those ratings if you want to. But also, part of the pro membership is you can make the models yourself. And when you do that and you change the ratings of the players, it's going to optimize their rating as of, how you've weighted that model, not the projection, because that would kind of defeat the purpose. Because then in that case, we all might as well just have one model.
Right.
Yeah. So
just a straight projections model, like most sites out there give you.
Right. Yeah, which doesn't take into account what contest you're in, whether it's a cash or GPP, and there's obviously a lot of factors which you can get into in that video, but definitely it's not straight projections, which is a good thing, is what we're trying to say.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think the difference between like a player projected for 25 points and 24.5 points, in people's mind, that's like a difference, because when they sort it, they're like, one guy's ranked, I don't know, point guard 6 and one guy's ranked point guard 9. But there's like, when you think about it, it's half a point. Like there's very little difference in trying to do like straight projections. And the margin for error, even though I spend a lot of time and I try to make them as accurate as possible, there's definitely a margin of error. I'm not always right, obviously, with those projections. So you kind of have to consider kind of his band of outcomes, and whether you think my projection is kind of in the 30th percentile, the 80th percentile of what you expect him to be at. And, if a player's range really is like, 20 to 26 points, and he's very predictable, maybe that's a player you want to use in 50-50s, but that's not a player I generally want to use, period, because there's just very little upside there. And even though he's predictable, I kind of want, if you want to cash high in tourneys or even win head-to-heads against strong opponents, you need to have that upside factored in as well. You can't just have very boring, predictable players who have a very narrow range of outcomes.
Right. Yeah, 100% agree. And that gets into a couple strategy questions that I've gotten, but we'll get into the slate first and then answer strategy sort of game theory questions at the end of this. And also, last video, podcast, whatever, I did not have the questions activated, the question answer part of it activated, but I figured out how to do it, and I think it is activated. So feel free to send in questions or tweet me questions or whatever, and we'll answer them at the end. So you want to jump into the slate, Justin?
Let's do it.
All right, so let's go through the actual kind of games first, and then we'll go position by position and go through it that way. So the games tomorrow, the first one, so they all start at 7, obviously. The first one is the 7 o'clock game, is the Cavs and the 76ers. What are your thoughts on this? The Cavs are, it looks like, about 12.5 point favorites right now. Obviously, that could change, but
yeah, this is the lowest over/under of the slate. Cavs are 12.5 favorites. I think of the Cavs, are really the only guy that kind of intrigues me is Kevin Love at 7,500. We've seen his usage percentage this year go from 22% to 26% per Basketball Reference, and a career high 46% of his shot attempts are threes, which really plays into DK. We get that 0.5 point bonus for 3-pointers made. Small sample size too, but LeBron's 29.9 usage percentage is his lowest since his second year in the league back in 2005. So you can really tell that LeBron's really trying to get Love more involved, because they're really going to need him, especially with Kyrie sidelined. And, LeBron can talk all he wants about playing 82 games. A, I don't think that's going to happen. And B, even if it does, he's going to need to kind of take his foot off the gas a little bit and have Love take, more of the workload. So this, I think Love is still underpriced at 7,500. He's been averaging like 44 DK points per game, and that's in the implied salary of around 10K. So based on just his per game average so far, he should be priced at 10K, and you're getting him in at 7,500. The only concern about this is kind of the blowout factor and the blowout potential. Love in their second game of the season, they won by 30 points, and he played 29 minutes. So I still think there's a pretty decent floor there, even if they blow the Sixers out kind of as we expect them to.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at too. I think that would be a big deal if he was priced where he probably should be. That's when I start getting sensitive about, okay, I really need to maximize the value and make sure that I'm not taking guys in blowout. And I kind of think that, I guess that's like my next level thought. First is I'm identifying just, what's the straight value and are they underpriced? And I think in this situation, just the fact that he's probably not only underpriced, but he's probably significantly underpriced, like you said. Compared to where his usage is. I think that you can kind of just stop there and not have to move on to the other factor of whether it's a blowout factor. I mean, is it? Yeah, of course, but he's enough at a value where it kind of doesn't matter. Is it enough where you could potentially fade him in a tournament? Sure. I think there's upside, but I think there's a tournament you can do whatever. But I think you're right. There's enough floor and enough ceiling where you could go with him in really either contest for me.
On that tournament point, I think he might actually be a little under-owned, maybe. I know he's popular, but there's so many good players on this slate that we'll get to a little later, especially with that Thunder Rockets game later, that he might fly a little under the radar here. And it gives you, especially at 7,100, I think even if you project like average ownership for him, I think that's still a plus EV spot considering his price. So I don't mind him in tournaments at all and cash games. I think he's a solid play kind of across the board.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, because you're right. I mean, in this slate that we have the Clippers, and Blake's just a monster now. So a lot of people are going to be on him as the top power forward. And then you have the Warriors and then that Thunder Rockets matchup, which is going to be really good. So you're right. There is kind of a lot of options. So people may try to go, stars and scrubs and try to get those top guys, Westbrook and Durant and Steph in it, and not have to worry about kind of getting the middle guys, even though Kevin Love is probably a star, just priced as a middle guy right now.
Yeah.
So any more guys stand out to you? Or it's been popular to use these 76ers guys who have been priced. I mean, Hollis Thompson has hit value, but I know I talked to you earlier and you were still kind of about them.
Yeah, and Robert Covington is a problem for Monday's game too. So he just kind of adds to the bodies. He's going to be limited. He's not going to play his full complement, but still, that's another body to kind of add to the mix, and it removes some appeal from Hollis Thompson, Jakar Sampson, Jeremy Grant. So this is a team I'm generally not excited about, especially at 92 implied points. Obviously Nerlens and Jahlil Okafor are the two best players on this team. But at their price points, I'm not too excited about either one.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel too. And I'm sure we'll hit them when we go through positions, but that's kind of my thoughts too. Love is kind of the main play, and then the rest of it with the low over-unders kind of making me look elsewhere.
Right.
So let's move on. The next game is we got two 7:30 games. The next one is Bucks and the Nets, which is kind of interesting game just because the Bucks are really bad, which I wasn't expecting them to be that great. I know some statistical models, there was sort of this wide range of, depending on where you looked at, some had them as a top, home playoff seed, and some of them expected a big regression. And so I watched them earlier today and they look bad. And they've kind of looked bad the whole, the whole season so far. And it's kind of making me worried about Monroe and some of these other guys that we thought were underpriced a little bit because of their situation, but I don't know. They're just not playing well. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'm not too excited about anybody. Monroe's fine at 7,900. That it's an implied point total of 36. He's averaged 45 on the season, so I think he's still okay.
Yeah, he's fair.
Monroe, Monroe's a pretty solid double threat. You know where you're going to get, and he's kind of pretty much the established kind of go-to guy on that team, and they don't really have any front court depth too, especially with Henson out. Jabari's out, so they're kind of like Chris Copeland, Johnny O'Brien, and then Miles Plumlee too. So he's going to get his minutes. I'm fine with Monroe, but in this slate with the other options, he doesn't really excite me. I think he's just an B minus play relative to everybody else. The guy that does maybe intrigue me a little bit is Giannis at 6,400. He's been very good so far, and I still think I think 6,400 is still a really palatable price point because even if you're factoring in like Jason Kidd's erratic rotations and the general frustration factor that comes with rostering Bucks, Giannis at 64, I don't know. I haven't constructed rosters yet to fully endorse him for cash, but I think he's still a good enough value to where you can consider him kind of in both cash and tourneys.
Yeah, he's a little more tourney to me. Yeah. Just because of you're right, the Bucks just being bad. And we're not really sure what Kidd's going to do. So that kind of takes me off him in cash.
I lean with you on that. I think definitely more of a tournament play, I think.
Yeah, and that's really it as far as this game goes. I mean, we're kind of sounding like we're not too enthralled by this slate, but it's just because some of the ugly ones are early.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Middleton. I mean, I liked him a lot heading in this year, but he's been brutal to start the season. He has 7 rebounds in 74 minutes, 1 combined steal and block on the season.
Yeah,
I mean, just not anywhere near. I think if you're the type that maybe creates like 100 plus lineups, maybe have one Middleton lineup in there in case you get the blow up because he's going to be super low owned considering his brutal start. So that's like the ultra contrarian play, but like I've watched Middleton play and I'm not impressed at all. So that's your dart throw if you want.
Which is so weird because he was the one of the plus minus darlings of last year. He was one of the best players by real plus minus, and everyone thought that he was the kind of one of the premier elite 3-and-E guys, and all of a sudden, not a great year. But I mean, a lot of it I think is they're still trying to figure out what is how they can juggle a lineup with Carter Williams as the point guard. I mean, they just don't have any spacing, and Middleton's supposed to do that, but it's still like every shot's contested from what I've seen so far. And they're going to have to figure that out. So I think that they're going to be okay in the long run this year. I think they'll figure out defense, and I think they'll figure out spacing, especially when Jabari can come back and give them a little space as a stretch 4. But I think until then, I'm kind of not super on them in cash until that happens. So. Cool. So let's move on to the next game. Is Spurs Knicks.
We gotta hit the Nets from the last game.
Do you want to?
I'll highlight one guy. I'll highlight Jared Jack at 6K. I think he's looked really good since coming back from that hamstring issue. Played a back-to-back. I think 30 plus minutes in both legs without any issues. There's Thaddeus Young isn't really too involved in the offense this year. Jack averaging 30 plus per game in DraftKings points so far, which gives him like an implied price point of like 7K, and he's priced at 6K. I don't think that's a slam dunk, but that's something you might want to look at just if you're looking for a point guard option, I'll say.
Yeah. See, just as far as the slate goes, and we'll get into this when we get into the point guards when we go through position by position. But I don't hate him at 6K, but Brandon Knight's only 600 more, which I like more. McCollum's still only 6,700, even though he has been a little bit down. And you got Conley and Rubio are only just a little bit more than that. So I think it's interesting. There's a lot of good point guards in this slate.
Yeah, another B minus play at best.
Not terrible, but right.
I mean, I had to mention Annette. She was just this slim picking, so I had to give him some love.
Fair enough. Okay, so let's move on to the next game, which is the Spurs and the Knicks. The Knicks 2-1. Who would have thought? So this is the other 7:30 game, and the Spurs are 7.5 point favorites on the road. So some interesting plays. I mean, so some of these kind of lower priced Knicks guys have actually been okay as far as hitting value, and the Spurs guys it's been a little interesting to see Aldridge kind of mesh with the team. I feel good about so far what I've seen that it's not going to affect Kawhi negatively. I know we talked about that in the preseason pod, but I think it's affecting Aldridge certainly, and kind of this is stuff they're gonna have to work out, I guess. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, on the Spurs, it's a back-to-back, so you always have to kind of look a little bit more closely with them when they're coming on a back-to-back. I'll read out some minute totals from today. Duncan played 29, Aldridge 35, Kawhi 34, Parker 27, Green 29. So they did play decent minutes, all of them. They didn't rest. I think this might be like a deeper rotation type game, especially against the Knicks. I could see the Spurs pulling out and getting out in front, and some of the bench guys getting a little bit more extended run on the second leg of a back-to-back, which kind of, I don't know, removes most of them from consideration if their minutes are all going to be like in that 20 to 28 range. I'm not really feeling too strongly about any Spurs on this one. I know Aldridge had his big 24 and 14 line on Sunday, but other than that,
that's kind of how I am too. I don't mind Kawhi at his price point in a tournament, but I'm probably not playing a Spur in cash.
Yeah,
that's kind of how I feel.
So who's on the Knicks that is intriguing? I know Langston Galloway. He's been really productive at around 25 minutes a game. Priced at 4,400. But this is not a great matchup though for really any of the Knicks in general against the Spurs team. I'm not crazy about this spot, and they're 98 implied points. Not a spot that I'm looking at that I'm salivating, even if these guys are a little underpriced.
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends to me on what their what that shooting guard spot is going to look like. I mean, we've seen Vujacic offer some salary relief at a really lowest price point. He means only min price really, either 3,500 or something like that. And I mean, he didn't score a lot last game, but I mean, I think he had a pretty solid line of rebounds and assists. So he's kind of a guy who, is going to get 25, 30 minutes at a really lowest price point. So if you're really going to try to get, let's say you want to get Steph and KD in a lineup, you got to try to find those guys. And maybe he's a guy that could do that. I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot of this slate is a lot of good teams actually. I think it's a good slate of basketball actually.
Yeah.
Which is good in that that's great. We get to watch good basketball, but it's also not so great in that I don't think there's a lot of great min plays. So it's going to be hard to fit those top guys in. I mean, we have Thunder Rockets, which is obviously star-studded and loaded. I mean, maybe Capella, and we can talk about that when we get to it. But Grizzlies, Warriors, Suns, Clippers, those are all guys that are expensive. So I'm having trouble finding the 3 to 4K guys that are actually going to get 25 minutes and be able to let me fit in KD and some, those guys.
Maybe Kyle O'Quinn at 3,900.
That's something like that. I would definitely wouldn't go that in cash, but
or if you want to go super boomer bust, maybe D Will at 3,200. Hope he gets some 20 minutes in garbage time or something, and manages to stat pad. But it's really kind of a hard team to predict on a game-to-game basis because a lot of them are hot and cold, and there's just general inconsistency kind of outside Melo.
Yeah, that's true. I'm also kind of wondering, I should study this, what I just feel like it would be a very Pop thing to do to go into New York, and they're coming off a back-to-back, and if New York comes out hot and whatever, because they have the rest, and all of a sudden Pop just doesn't play starters in the second half, and all of a sudden you're right, you have one of the situations where you have D Will who is going to get 25 minutes and really kill value. Obviously that's not something you want to depend on, but if you're looking for contrarian play to let you fit in those top studs,
GPPs, man. If you have a bunch of lineups in there, why not get a little D Will exposure? Because if he goes off, he's very boomer bust. If he goes off, he goes off because he's very scoring dependent, and streaky. So he's either gonna give you 5 points or 25 points. So
which is perfect GPP play.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. So that's kind of the intriguing part of the Knicks. I'm not like super on Melo here just because of the matchup against Kawhi, number one, and number two, just I think there's better options around his price point. But I think some of those lower guys could potentially be a nice option in GPPs if you're going that route. But
yeah.
Cool. So let's move on. We got 4 games left. The next one is we got 2 8:00 games. And some pretty good ones, actually. First one's the Thunder and the Rockets, which is kind of interesting because Thunder are 3-0, Rockets are 0-3. We thought this would be kind of a juggernaut situation, but Rockets have kind of struggled lately.
I'm surprised they're only a 1-point dog here.
Yeah,
I'm really surprised. Like if Vegas knows something that we don't, because they're both coming off back-to-backs. I know this is a road back-to-back for the Thunder, which I don't love, but.
Yeah.
Are they expecting Dwight to make that much of a difference?
That's my only thought is Dwight. Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know. Or maybe they're just expecting Harden not to be as bad. Just some like regression, maybe.
But still, I mean, given their body, I mean, it's a limited body work, obviously, but if they're doing their body work so far, it seems.
Do you know where to open that?
Yeah, I can look. Let's see.
Because I know it's 1 now, but I'm curious to see if it's been bet down.
Yeah, I'll look up I have it right here.
Yeah. So I'll keep talking while you do that. So Thunder, obviously interesting. And I actually thought about this before because we had the game the other night where Westbrook and KD both went off for ridiculous amounts of fantasy points. So.
Okay. So sorry to interrupt you. It opened the pick'em and it's -2 Thunder right now.
Why did it open at Pick'em though?
I don't know, man. That's
Vegas.
I don't know. That's odd to me. But go ahead. We'll break down Thunder.
Yeah, that is interesting. Huh. Okay. So Thunder. I thought it was interesting that those guys, they both went off, and I think it's something that you could think about in a tournament. I think stacking is going to be something that I'm really thinking about this year because I think that a lot of like the kind of negative correlation plays that we've thought about, it's almost like we should just throw them out the window in tournaments. And I've just become less interested in correlations in tournaments. Not that they're not useful and important, but just because if you focus on them too much, then you're taking yourself out of some potential plays that could win you. Maybe it's just like the correlations versus ownership.
I'll say two counterpoints to that. One is that usually the stacks that you want are really expensive. Like obviously they're stacking KD and Russ is like not an option at 20,000 total. That's just not. And the second thing is that in football when you can stack something like Stafford, Calvin Johnson, Golden Tate, or like Carson Palmer, Larry Fitzgerald. Floyd, that Floyd and Tate are going to see most of the snaps and still be like pretty involved and have a good shot at 15 to 20 DK points at least. I mean, they're going to be in the mix. They have scoring potential. With some of these guys, if you're stacking like Cantor or like, I think that's probably like the lowest number 2 stack you can justify on this team. But if you get to like Augustine or like those guys, and it's not a good stack. I mean,
I don't even consider that a stack really.
So give me an example of like a stack on this slate in general, not just on this team, but one that you would consider.
That I would consider. Like I'm okay. So I'm okay with a couple stacks actually. That probably people wouldn't be on. So I know we've talked about in the past. I'm okay with the CP3 DeAndre stack in a GPP. Just because I think there's some correlation with assist and just the way that DeAndre scores. I'm even fine with like I know that you probably don't want 2 guards together, like in theory, but I'm fine with Lillard McCollum, just because I think McCollum is still a little cheap, and like I'm fine with a KD Russ stack. I know it's expensive, and I don't think you're right. I think it's probably impossible to get it in on a small slate like this, or this is fairly small compared to what Mondays are going to be. But if you're talking like a 14 or 15 game slate where almost every team is playing and you have a lot of options as a result, then I think it's feasible, and I think it's actually kind of a good idea for at least a lineup, just because I like, obviously the ownership of both of them are going to be pretty high. Like you're going to get them at like 20%, right. But I would imagine the ownership of them together is probably pretty low.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to kind of find the right spots, and I agree. Like,
it's slate dependent.
One of them has to be like cheap too, or that really helps. Cause in the case of McCollum at 6,700, because if you're talking like really price prohibitive ones, it gets really tricky, because I think you're also relying a little bit too much on those min price guys, which in tournaments I generally don't want to do. In tournament, my general strategy is to kind of go like try to hit triples and not just go like stars and scrubs. I think that's a little bit not as optimal. It's just trying to find guys that are under-owned, that are like kind of in that mid-tier, you know, and stack up on those guys, because that's generally like where guys are under-owned. Is like, it's not the stars, it's not KD, it's not Russ that are under-owned. It's like those Kevin Love types that are under-owned. So you kind of hit like those doubles and triples and try to get enough points from those guys to get in the mix. But yeah, let's go back to OKC. Obviously, Russ and KD are going to be really popular options. For me, you know, Russ at 10,300, Durant at 9,700. So there's a $600 difference between their values. Right now, I would favor Russ as my pure value play, without ownership considered, because I think he offers a lot of peripheral stats as well. I think he has a very good shot at like a triple double, for example. Not a very good shot, but you know, a decent shot at a triple double and a double double as well. You get those point bonuses on DK. So KD, especially, I was watching that Orlando game. He was a little bit too score independent for me, and didn't put enough stats up around the board to kind of give me that, I don't know, monster 65 point you know, total that I want. Out of those guys. So out of those, you know, and I'll add on to that. I thought Lawson was really interesting. I'll say that he talked about the defense that Steph was going up against in the playoffs when he was
awful.
He was 67th among 77 point guards last year in defensive real plus minus. So he's a terrible defensive point guard. And for him to just talk about how he's going to make Steph work or whatever is laughable to me. And I think Russ is going to feast on this matchup. And you know, I think Houston might be behind. I think they're going to be behind. So that means probably more Lawson and less Beverly, which is good for Russ.
Yeah, I agree with that. So that Rockets Golden State game, did you get to watch that?
Yes, I did. That was wonderful.
Okay, so there's like one basketball rule in the world. Like if someone came to me and was like, hey, like I'm trying to like make an NBA team and I'm going up against all these guys, like I have to play the Golden State Warriors in practice. Like give me one rule and only one rule I have to follow. My one rule would be do not go under a Steph Curry screen. And Lawson
probably not a good idea.
Lawson went under a Steph Curry screen. I was just like, how are you in the NBA and that's what you do?
And how are you talking about other people's defense? Like, where do you get off on doing that? That makes
I couldn't believe he went under the screen. I'm just like, are you aware this is the best shooter of all time? Like, why are you going under screen? Yeah, after you talked about that, you're going to make him work. That's not making him work.
Exactly. It's just giving him
a wide open three. Like Steph doesn't need a wide open three. He'll hit one contested, let alone a wide open one. That's a layup to him.
This is true.
But yeah, so I guess my thoughts on those two guys, especially going against the Rockets, is you're right. I think Westbrook's the better value, but I think I prefer Durant in tournaments a little bit more. And it's almost just like this sounds a little simplistic, but I think you can kind of be simplistic in this nature. Is I usually, when I'm trying to decide between those two guys, which one I want to roster to in a tournament, I usually look for which one has the better matchup, and I choose the other one. So Westbrook obviously has a really plus matchup here. You know, like they're projected to score a lot of points, and the Rockets look really bad, and he's going against Lawson, who's really bad. So I think a lot of people are going to be, okay, let me get Westbrook. And so obviously just the ownership
Yeah, Russ is a chalk play for sure.
Yeah, he's definitely a cash guy.
Yeah, there's it's not even close. I think Russ is at 10,300. I think that's just like an easy, like you don't have to overthink it. Just play Russ and cash. I don't think.
Yeah,
I'd be really surprised if he doesn't hit like 46 points, which is like his break even implied at 10,300. He's been averaging 66, I think, before today's blowout. So
yeah, he's pretty easily the number one point guard on the slate for me.
yeah,
Like,
even with Wardell just killing everything. So
yeah, I'm a little worried about Steph in this particular slate, which we'll get to their game in a second, but it's mostly just about pace. Has nothing to do with how good he is, because he's obviously
yeah.
So what about on the Rockets side for you?
Harden's a good GPP play. Not
he's been really bad.
Yeah, I think Tom Haberstroh of ESPN had a stat that said if Harden made 28 of his next threes, he'd still be behind Steph in 3-point percentage. And that if you kind of compare,
good or bad?
that's 28 for 28. That's doable. That's a couple games. I don't know.
And that's assuming that Steph just doesn't take anymore.
Exactly. Exactly. But I think Harden's a good GPP. I wouldn't touch him in cash, obviously, with his form right now. We got Dwight Howard coming back, so Capella will go back to a reserve role. It'll be interesting what they do at power forward, because today they randomly started Marcus Thornton, who was a DNP CD over the first couple games, and he went off too. And obviously they lost, but sure. Thornton got his. So against Ibaka and Steven Adams, you would think they would start Montrez and Dwight. Would they not, or would they go small again?
No, I would assume they would go Harrell.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be my thought. Yeah,
that seems a stretch to have Trevor guarding Trevor guarding Ibaka. Maybe, I don't know. Thornton starting it really took me by surprise for sure.
Yeah. See, that's why I'm worried about this, just because that surprised me too, and I'm not sure how to kind of take the situation now.
Yeah. So any plays on this? Dwight at 7K. Yeah.
I'm okay with Thornton if he starts.
Yeah.
Just because of his super low price. And Harden maybe in a tournament.
Yeah. That's surprising though for a team with 107 implied point total for us not to really like any of these plays. I'm gonna think a little harder about these Rockets, because there has to be like some value here for sure.
Well, we started off talking about this game where we really, really disagreed with the line.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be where we start, is we need to figure out what's up with the line and then kind of go from there. Because if we think the line's just super off, which it kind of seems like that's the easy answer, then obviously bumps down our own thoughts, which I think is what happened here. But I do agree that it needs some more thought.
I'd also be. I mean, obviously, there's some clarity when they declare the starting lineup on Monday, so whether it's Montrez or Marcus Thornton, or I don't know. They might start KJ McDaniels or sign a 10-day and start him. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do at this point. So yeah, we'll have to wait, I think, until Monday to hear the starting lineup to have some kind of clarity on who are some of those like lower end good bargain types, whether it be Montrez. I think Montrez at 3,300, that's really good to me. I would still, that's really good value. I think I'd consider him in cash, even if I wouldn't, even if he doesn't start.
Not if he doesn't start.
Yeah, if he starts, he's obviously a no-brainer at 3,300.
Right. Yeah, I'm fine with him in a GPP if he doesn't start. But I wouldn't go cash for any Rocket, with the exception of whether if Montrez starts.
Yeah, and maybe Lawson's been struggling too. I don't know.
I like Lawson's price point, but I don't trust it in cash.
I believe his assist rate's really far down so far to start the season. It's been obviously a lot of Harden handling the ball and taking away those assist opportunities, which kind of lowered his loss and ceiling a lot because he's not going to score a ton either with Harden there. So you kind of have to wonder, even at 5,700, what the actual ceiling is in a good. What's a good Lawson game look like? In terms of DK points, and how does that compare to his expected of 25 points?
Yeah, I think that's fair almost. Like, I don't think his ceiling is that much higher than that right now.
Probably like 28 to 30. In like a super I can't go much further than that, but I think
agree.
That's fairly realistic.
Yeah, and with how many good point guards there are, like there's no reason really for me. Even if he's super low owned, I don't see a big game coming really. I mean, especially going up against Russ. Cool. So let's move on to the next game. We got Blazers at Wolves, and it looks like the Wolves are 5.5 point favorites right now. So what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah. Lillard and McCollum still obviously the top two, the most popular plays out of the slate. I have no problem with either, even though I don't love 98 implied points. That's not great for me.
It is lower than I expected almost.
Yeah, I still think the best play until his price point comes up to closer to 5,750 or 5,500 is Aminu. Aminu at 4,800 is obscene. That's way too low for Aminu. So Aminu at 4,800 I think is strongly in cash, and the others are case by case, I think.
Yeah. So where is he at right now?
Aminu?
Yeah.
4,800.
So what implied points does that put him at?
That puts him at an implied of like 20.
So he's averaging he's averaging 14 points a game.
He's averaging 29.4 DK points.
Yeah.
And his implied is 20.
Yeah. That's ridiculous. Yeah, because he's averaging 14 points a game, and that doesn't kind of factor in all of his peripherals, which is kind of what makes him interesting in general. And then the scoring is, I think you agree with that. The scoring is just a bonus for Aminu.
Exactly.
And the fact that he almost hits value completely on that right now is, I'm fine with him in cash. Yeah, I think he'll actually probably be in all my cash games.
Yeah, no, I have no problem putting him in tourneys either.
Both for me, yeah.
Like we talked about this with Aminu, like with some other players, they're kind of the context or the way their stats are made up, like the public values like points, obviously, in the scores and those assist numbers or the rebounds. And Aminu kind of slides under the radar. He's kind of a role player. He's not very popular. So I even think even his killing value is he's still more like a sharp community play where kind of the players that really understand and know what they're doing will play him, but the general public probably is still a little slow to catch up on how good he is.
Yeah, agreed. So he's actually one of probably my favorite value on the day, I believe.
Yeah.
I agree. McCollum is interesting. I think he's probably catching up into where his pricing should be, but maybe a little bit under for me.
He's still a bargain at 67.
Yeah. Timberwolves guys, what are your thoughts? Any guys stand out? It's kind of an for me too. I'm okay with Wiggins, but not at his price point.
I would much rather roster Towns at $100 cheaper.
Well, agreed. Yeah. So I like Towns fine. I think he's interesting.
That's a good matchup for him too. I'm not particularly scared about Mason Plumlee or.
Hey, that's USA champion Mason Plumlee.
We talked about Mason Plumlee, how even though he gets a steal and a block or whatever, his actual defense is not very good. So Towns is I like him at 6,100 actually. I think not a lot of people will like him, and not a lot of people will be on him on the slate.
Oh, see, that's what my concern was. I was actually thinking the opposite.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just because I mean, he's the number one pick, and he exploded last game for
Yeah.
what was it? Was it 30 points almost? Um, and he's like a really good, kind of like the only good in that range salary relief guy. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
you got like Okafor down there who's okay, but I mean, none of these guys are like super intriguing if you want to kind of go lower for a center. Um,
No,
and
I
I don't
think
know.
you're right. I think you're right. I didn't consider that aspect of it.
Yeah, I'm really worried about the ownership is my only thing for him. But I love the play in general, just kind of pure value.
Yeah.
And the rest of them are kind of like I'm okay with Rubio in a tournament. We kind of
Yeah.
saw that he has potential just to throw up 14, 15 assists in a night, and I think he'll be pretty under-owned just because this slate is particularly super stacked with point guards.
Yes.
And he's just kind of right in the middle. Like you just have to pay up a little more for. No, I'm sorry. It's like he's right in the Conley McCollum range, or jump up to Lillard at 90. Yeah, 92. So.
Or jump up to Bledsoe at 75 even.
Yeah, if you're going guard for sure.
I let me add to that Lillard is probably one of the worst defensive point guards in the league too, so it's a good matchup for him.
Yeah, we're talking about Lawson, but Lillard gives him a run for his money, that's for sure. Yeah. I think McCollum is okay. So I'd be interested to see.
I'm good with him in cash.
No, I'm saying I think McCollum's an okay defender.
Oh yeah, but his size is a bit of an issue at the 2.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I just don't know how they'll match up.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's more of like a basketball question of like a long term, like who's going to guard who for the Blazers. I don't think they're necessarily really worried about it this year, but.
So you're worried about them cross matching and Rubio getting more McCollum? Yeah, that's fair.
But I don't feel comfortable like making a prediction of what that's going to be like, but it's something that I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those are kind of my thoughts on that game. Any more before we move on?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So we got 2 more games, and these are the late ones. So 2 at 10:30. First one is the Grizzlies against the Stephen Curry Warriors. What are your thoughts on this one?
Dare you fade Steph at his rate? You think he's shooting like 59, 49?
That's the question, right?
95 from the field right now?
Yeah.
You joked we chatted offline that those are Mason Plumlee percentages. Or Myers Leonard,
yeah.
Myers Leonard percentages rather. The Grizzlies are a tough defense though, and they slow the pace like you said. So I'm not expecting Steph to necessarily struggle, but like relative to like Russ at $100 more expensive, I don't think it's particularly close, especially with the Warriors favored at 9 too. Yeah. And maybe this game gets a little out of hand, and that's, we know Steph can put up like 20 plus in the quarter, which kind of negates that to an extent. But if we're talking, it's like choosing between, I don't know, steak and lobster or something. Like they're both really good, and you can't go wrong. But just one is a little better than the other. Like, I'm not going to knock Steph here. I just think relative to Russ, it's not that close.
Yeah, that's my only thing. Like, I'm fine with him in a slate that's not this one, really.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting. I mean, I wrote an article last week that was on, when a high-paced team goes up against a low-paced team, like what happens as far as production goes, as far as DraftKings production goes. And obviously this is these were kind of the 2 teams that we looked at in the study, particularly because the Warriors are one of the fastest paced teams and the Grizzlies are obviously one of the slowest ones. We saw that in the playoffs and kind of how that affected the teams, and really it doesn't really affect the low end guys. So the slow paced teams aren't really affected by who they play. They kind of just drag everyone down to their level. But the high-paced teams definitely see, a dip in their production as far as that fantasy slate when they play against the low-end teams. So I think for like a superstar like Steph, that's fine in a GPP. But with like with Westbrook right there, there's just no reason for me to chance it really.
So let me ask you this. I think this is a really interesting question. Predict Russell Westbrook's ownership percentage in GPPs and Steph's ownership percentage in GPPs.
I actually think it's going to be a lot closer than we think.
Just because recency bias. Yeah.
Which kind of makes it more like I'm okay with fading Steph more than I usually would. I think this would be a spot later in the season where I would look at Steph. But I think just kind of in this particular situation, just the fact that the season is still young and there's some recency bias, Steph's just destroying teams. But they still played a slow pace. Like even though he's been destroying teams, like the slow pace is not something that like there's just something that's going to affect him. That's just kind of data. Like it's not something that it's like Steph can overcome. He just can't overcome the fact that Conley's going to walk the ball up the floor.
He can though, because he can just start launching 60-footers and making them all.
That's true.
Like 4-second possessions. There you go.
Yeah, and I would say, kind of going to your point about, if they get up, I think that if they got up, I think they would, I don't know, for some reason I think that they would be okay with him playing kind of into the fourth quarter against another team, but kind of just against the Grizzlies and the fact that they have a history, especially last year with Conley, especially like, being really physical with him coming off screens. I don't think that the Warriors are going to be interested if they're up in putting that. There's a difference between putting miles on Steph Curry body and putting Grizzly miles on Steph Curry's body. So I think they would be quick to kind of say, hey, let's get out of Memphis or no, they're playing at home, but let's get out and move on to the next game. So I'm still fine with them in a GPP, but yeah, I think it's pretty easy to say that that Westbrook's the option as far as cash goes.
I'll add one play here that I still like a lot on the Warriors is Festus Ezeli at 3,400. Especially this matchup is excellent for him because the Grizzlies are the biggest team in the league with Zebo and Marc Gasol, and they're going to need a banger in there like Festus instead of a guy like Mo Spates to really D up these guys and match their physicality. The only danger here is obviously that he's going to do a lot of banging with those guys in the post, and there's potential for foul trouble. But at 3,400, the bar he has to clear is super low. Yeah. So like even if he plays like 24 minutes, I think I'm still really happy with rostering Festus.
I am too. I love Festus. Yeah. I'm not even fine with him in cash.
Yeah.
You are too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually think that I kind of like him as a GPP play too. I think he'll be underowned, not only just because I don't think people are on Festus Ezeli as a guy.
How dare you?
Anyway, but I think he is also going to be underowned. Just the fact that I feel like a lot of people who just kind of casual players just know, hey, like you probably don't want to take a big against the Grizzlies. Which is probably true in general, but I think this situation doesn't really apply because we're not really looking for a huge game out of him. We're just looking for just 25 minutes of like give me like 6 points and 8 rebounds. That's all I need.
10 rebounds, give me a couple blocks, a steal, and we're good. You just want those peripheral stats. I'm not coming here with a scoring. I'm coming here for the dirty work, and I think we're going to have to ask Festus to do a lot of that and turn his swag up a little bit for this matchup.
I didn't want to insult Festus because I really like Festus. I'm actually in like this super deep season-long dynasty league with Seth Partnow over at Nylon Calculus, and so yeah, super deep. And I have him as one of my dynasty guys, so I'm invested into the Festus.
Yeah, they're going to need to pay him, and they will.
They will, and I think he deserves it. I actually think that he's pretty underrated. I think he's actually probably one of the best backup centers in the league.
Agreed. He was really crucial in those playoffs when kind of Bogut fell off the map and wasn't playing well, and they opted for Festus instead. He held his own. Yeah, and he was playing some competent big men too, and Mozzie and Tristan, and he did fine. So I think Festus is. I like his talent level, which helps me endorse a cheap play. Usually, you're touting like these guys are just getting rolled, but they kind of are
They're
not
not
very good.
Yeah.
So there's a lower floor there just because their talent level's not that high. But Festus I actually really like as a player. So it makes
I think he's good. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier for me to endorse him in general.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I think he had a lot of like kind of the Bismack Biyombo problems early in his career. He had not the greatest hands, and he kind of was just very one-sided on the floor. But I actually think that he's kind of come a long way as far as being able to, catch and go up and play some of the pick and rolls off Steph well. And there's a couple plays where, Steph is just like, he attracts 9 guys, even though there's only 5 guys on the floor. So Ezeli was just getting wide open dunks. So I think if he's getting 25 minutes a game, he's going to get a couple dunks and rebounds just because of Steph.
Right.
So he's really safe to me, to be honest. Anyone else on this game, or do you want to move on to the last one?
No, we don't like anybody on Memphis, do we?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either.
I don't. And it's a lot of it's just about the Warriors.
Road dogs.
Yeah. Like heavy road dogs.
Road dogs for a slow-paced team who, not a good spot. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I don't think that. Yeah, the pace isn't really worrying to me as far as their side of it.
Well, what I'll mention why I mentioned that and just now is just because if they get down and those guys aren't having good games, it's really hard for them to kind of stat pad and put up stats in a hurry to kind of supplement their lines. Because if it's just going to be like a slow malaise throughout, it's just really hard for them to kind of like grind possessions and get back into it. So like if they're down by like 14 with like 5 minutes left, that's like with their pace, that's like an 18-point deficit for a lot of teams because they have to grind so hard to just get those possessions and get those stops. And really make the most out of their, a couple fewer less possessions on the offensive end.
Agreed. Yeah, I do think that some of these really slow pace teams, I'm fine with them in tournaments, but I kind of looking for more games that are closer in nature. It's just I would rather them try to like slow it down, but be close and be efficient as opposed to just have to come back because that's not really their game. Yeah. Agreed. All right, so let's move on to this last one, and then we'll kind of touch on the positions before we leave. Last game is Suns at Clippers. And again, this is a 10:30 game, and again, a pretty high spread. The Clippers are 9-point favorites as of right now. So what are your kind of first thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think people are going to be on the Thunder a lot. I think this is the game you kind of want to target, especially in GPPs, because I think it'll fly under the radar a little bit too much for my liking. Even if you want to get a piece of the Suns with Brandon Knight at 6K, I like that a lot. What is he, 6,500?
67 maybe. I had to pull it up a second ago. Hang on.
So he's between.
He's 66.
Yeah, he's 66. Okay, so Brandon Knight 66. I like that quite a bit. Even if you want to go, outside the box and go Bledsoe at 75, that's fine, and spend up a little bit. I think those guys would be pretty low owned, especially in this highly paced game. Those are 2 guys that you want to take shots on, and I really like the call on the Chris Paul and DJ correlation play in tournaments. I think that's really good and a really good way to differentiate yourselves from a lot of the teams that are going to have Russ, KD, or Steph in their lineups.
Agreed. Yeah. So I'm interested in those sort of stacks. Would you ever go a Blake DeAndre stack just to get the ownership?
Yeah, I mean that's still a acceptable play to me because they're not.
They don't like vulture each other's stuff. Yeah.
Not too much. I mean, they still kind of go off each other's rebounds, and that kind of limits their upside a little bit. But the fact that one is so scoring minded and one isn't scoring minded at all, really, and doesn't depend on points for his value, it makes it kind of borderline, but it's fine if the ownership percentages make it to where
optimal.
Where it's optimal.
Yeah, I agree on that. So I guess my other thoughts is how you feel about Chris Paul in this loaded point guard slate. And that's tough for me. That's kind of the one of the bigger questions of this slate is what I do with Chris.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, 9,700, that's expensive. And
it's just like it's not that much more for Westbrook.
Or 500 more for Steph.
Right, yeah.
We just talked about this. You CP3, DeAndre stack in tournaments is fine.
Yeah.
So you can go with CP3 in tournaments for sure. Another way to differentiate yourself. But in cash, I mean, there's no real reason for me to get cute here and to price down 500 or 600 from Russ or Steph to go to CP3.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel too. So kind of these like peripheral guys, any interest in those?
Like they're bench guys, you mean?
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, let's see, 5,600.
I don't really.
Yeah, 5,600.
Or even on the other side.
Tyson Chandler at 5,600 makes him an implied of 25. I think that's about right. I don't think you're coming up too ahead there, even though they'll need him a little bit more against DJ.
But my thing is Ezeli at 34.
Yeah.
And Towns at just a couple hundred more.
Agreed.
It makes it hard. It makes it hard to find lineups with Chandler.
There's a lot of like these B minus type plays, which are palatable. They're okay, but they're probably not optimal.
Yeah, and I think basketball is interesting. Like we have NFL where like it's less important to me. Like a Chandler, if we were playing NFL, like a guy who's kind of in kind of those middle of those price points to me, I think I would be fine with rostering him in a GPP. But basketball is like it's just so predictable, and like Chandler just doesn't offer the upside to get the ownership on your side. Whereas in football, like you definitely want to like be really ownership minded in a GPP. It's almost like more important than projections, just because projections are so tough in football. There's just such a wider range of outcomes, whereas NBA is smaller. Like there's just not many things that can happen. Like Chandler's not going to blow up for 50 points. And so like you could get him at a discounted ownership percentage than Towns, but like it just doesn't, the opportunity cost to do that just doesn't make sense really in basketball.
Yeah, that reminds me a little bit, going back to like what we talked about, the player models. I last year, our projections, Chandler had a really good matchup where we projected him for like 0.75 more points than Klay Thompson. I think Chandler had like a 30-something point, a DK point night, which is really good. He kind of like exceeded my projections, but I saw Klay Thompson at 0.75 projected less, and I decided to kind of roll the dice with him on a GPP, and that happened to be the
third quarter,
the Kings game. Yeah, so that kind of goes back to a little bit of what we're talking about with just like knowing the range of outcomes and just kind of understanding that all projected values aren't created equal, and there's nuance that you have to delve into and figure out, and game selection and figuring out what's best, what's most optimal for each game you choose is really underrated in DFS. And even we group things like GBPs together, but things like even like like qualifiers or lower range smaller tournaments, there's differences in kind of every single level, entry field size. There's nuance, there's kind of differences in all these little pockets. So you kind of have to figure out and use the models and coming up with a system slider weights that really kind of fit your needs.
Agreed. Yeah, and that's just, I think it's important to just kind of like know the difference between the sports. And I agree that projections are just very different in basketball than they are in football. And it's just kind of understanding the nature of outcomes and what those mean as far as your model goes. And even though Towns and Chandler might be projected at a similar price point, like for me, what I'm really concerned about, and I do this personally. So if you're kind of wondering like what we do personally, because I know that some people are like, you give all these suggestions, but what do you actually do when you make your lineups? Like I obviously look at the projections and I look at the ratings of my models and I kind of weight things, but I also look at the floor and ceilings part of the models that I put, and I'll even kind of sort it by ceilings to make sure that I'm not forgetting a guy who's in like a crazy good ceiling matchup.
Yep.
And just make sure that I'm hitting all the guys with a top ceiling, because that's really important to me in GPPs, obviously.
Yeah, because the money is always all concentrated at the top. So even if you're moneying barely in GPPs, you're not making that much money. I mean, you're kind of doubling your money. So you might as well play cash games where your chances of cashing are so much higher.
So
you're playing GPPs to take down that top 5 cash, the top 3 cash. So ceiling is really all that matters. I don't know, say your target point total to win a GPP, let's say is like 350 on DraftKings. Let's say that wins you a GPP. It doesn't matter if you hit 300. It doesn't matter if you hit 195. Like you can put together the worst GPP lineup or ones that hit doubles and barely hit the cash, and it doesn't make a difference. You want to hit that big score, that 350. So that kind of the you don't want to align all these guys that have the wider range of outcomes, the higher ceilings, and hope that kind of things align and they kind of all are able to hit on one night and you get that big score.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of kind of interesting ways to do that, and I don't think we have time to go through that today, but it's going to be something that we're going to talk through, and we'll kind of bring up at least one strategy point each pod and kind of hit on that. But I think there's some interesting ways to be contrarian in basketball as opposed to football. One of it is to kind of use these negatively correlated stacks. I think another one is to I really like the idea of going to try to figure out where the value is. I think center has actually been a position that's been a little underpriced. So I've been going heavy with center in my flex or my utility, just to kind of get those both in. And most people go guard. So it's kind of a way for me to be contrarian. So I think contrarian in basketball is less about like getting guys that people don't know about, and it's more about lineup construction for me.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's something that we'll talk more about. But you want to run through, just make sure we'll run through the positions to make sure we didn't forget to talk about anyone before we end it.
Oh yeah. So just a general note on these. So on our projections, they're all manually done. There's like none of it that's automated. So I go through everybody every night and manually do their minutes, manually change their rates. Yeah. So the projections if you're looking at like the projections at like, I don't know, like 9 p.m. Pacific the night before, they're not going to be updated because I do my sweeps from like 11 Pacific to like 2 a.m. Pacific. So yeah, you shouldn't expect moving forward, just a note in general, that our projections won't be like in their completed form until closer to like the morning after.
Yeah, good point. Cool. So yeah, let's go through. I'm just kind of going through these positions and make sure we didn't forget anyone. So point guard, it looks like we kind of a lot of this pod was kind of focusing on that, just because I think that was kind of the big part of this slate is kind of how you deal with point guard, just because it's loaded. So we've talked about all the top guys pretty extensively. The only one that we really didn't touch on, not a top guy by any means, but someone who could potentially be in play, is Mo Williams. He's at.
I had him down.
He's at 53, and an interesting matchup just because they're big favorites, and potentially they could just let him.
So
run the show.
I looked at it. His minutes distribution is my biggest problem, because in the opener, when they won by 2, or I think they lost by 2 actually, he played 37 minutes, and their next 2 games, won by 30, won by 10, 23, and 26 minutes.
Okay.
So I'm really concerned about the blow up potential and the effect on his minutes.
Yeah. See, I guess anecdotally, I thought that he would get a little bit of a bump in a blowout, but it seems like those minutes would go to Delhi maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looks like it.
Okay. So then really, it doesn't really sound like he's got a floor or upside that I'm really interested in. So that's kind of it as point guards go. Shooting guards, we kind of talked about all of these. I guess the ones we really didn't get to, we didn't talk about Clay. He's been kind of lately.
Yeah, but always a GPP play.
He is, yeah, because he has a potential to go off like that third quarter you talked
Right,
about.
but the thing is, like, the difference between Clay and Steph is Steph has like a floor. Clay's floor is like way down there. If he's he can just bomb a lineup.
He'd be bad, yeah.
Right. So, given his slow start, his ownership level is definitely going to be really low. So you just kind of throw him out. It's not a great matchup either because he's going to get a lot of TA, right?
I would assume he's going to get almost all TA.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah, I'm not interested really at all. I guess TA might be a little on Steph, but I actually think Conley defends Steph pretty well, so I don't think that they really need that.
I agree.
So yeah, I agree. I'm kind of off Clay. No, not really shooting guards any. I'm not interested in other than that.
Danny Green at 4,500. No. Can he benefit if Pop goes the other way with some of these guys and he plays a little bit more? Does he have that potential?
Yeah, see, that's, I guess, anecdotally, I thought that he would be like, kind of like Mo, where I would assume that he would be part of the guys. I mean, in the past, when Pop has always kind of given those guys rest or let them stay home, and even those got Pop in trouble, Danny's always been a part of that.
They don't have depth though anymore, so he's not gonna play Manu for sure. They don't have Bellinelli. They don't have Corey Joseph. Patty Mills is gonna sub for Tony Parker. So like,
is McCallum?
Yeah, he can play some.
He can play a little off guard. Yeah.
Yeah, I like McCallum, but I don't know. Danny Green maybe.
Maybe. Yeah.
If we get wind that Pop might do something funky with his rotations or something.
Yeah. I like him in a tournament because he's a little like, I mean, he's not like Clay to that extent. Like he's not going to go off for like 40 points, but he could go off for like 7 threes.
Yes.
And on DK where you get that bonus, I mean, he could hit value just on kind of that alone. So, yeah. In his GPP, I don't mind for sure.
Okay.
Cool. Small forward, make sure we're not missing any guys. I guess one guy we didn't really talk about was LeBron.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah. I think he's still playing in the NBA. What are your thoughts on him? It's just hard to pay up for him when Durant's the same price.
I'm not gonna pay up when it might be a blowout. And
I think we talked about this off the air earlier today, where LeBron has said that he's going to play full minute load and like be engaged this year. But I think both of us are kind of calling his bluff on that one.
Yeah.
And they just don't need him to play
against Philly too. Come on.
He doesn't need 35 minutes against Philly. Yeah. It's ridiculous. So not really cash or GPP for me either.
I'm not gonna bet on him doing 3/4 worth of his work versus 4/4 worth of what Katie or Russell can do. You know what I'm saying? Because I think like their minute floors are drastically different.
They are, and their salaries are identical.
Right.
So there's just opportunity cost is just not worth it really in any contest for me. So going on to power forward, I think we talked about all these guys. I guess a guy that we didn't, or two guys that are interesting, I guess, that we didn't mention are one is Dre, and the other is Markieff. I guess I'd be interested in your thoughts on those two guys.
Markieff is interesting to me.
He's still underpriced to me.
Yeah, he's
not steady though.
He's actually priced appropriately based on what he's done. Okay. So he's at 23.3 points, DK points per game, and that translates to about like 5,300, and he's priced at 6,300. So,
but what was he at last year? See, I feel like that's probably priced appropriately this year. But I guess the question is where he's at this year compared to last year, which is the more real Markieff.
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer to that, which is why I'm kind of GPP only and even still limited exposure.
Are we going narrative street here with Marcus?
Oh, yeah, good point. Yeah, I missed that. Could be.
I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe so.
We know how often Narrative Street comes through, though, so you probably want a little piece of him in GPPs.
Didn't it come true in NFL stuff today? We had
yeah, the Odell Beckham,
that's right.
LSU, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Him come, yeah. I mean, there were Narrative Street cleaned up today.
Oh, and it was All Saints Day in New Orleans.
Yes.
And Breeze had 7 touchdowns? So,
one more than Kaepernick's thrown this season.
All right, let's stay on basketball. So the center position's last one, and we'll kind of end it up after that. But we have Gasol. He's just a little overpriced for me, especially kind of. I don't know. This center position is interesting. We have Gasol and DeAndre are both at 8, and then it dips down to 7 for Brook, and then it kind of goes down to Towns at 6. So there's kind of like no in between spots. You kind of have to choose how you want to construct your lineup, really.
I think this is definitely a spot, at least in cash, where you're spending up at other positions, especially point guard, and then you're spending down at center with a guy like, if you want to go a little top end, Karl Anthony Towns at 61, or you can go super low with Festus at 3,400.
And I'm probably going to have a lineup with both of them.
Yeah.
Because
to be contrarian?
Yeah, just be contrarian. Because I don't think many teams would have a Zealy Towns combination. But I will. This guy will.
This guy will too. And our 20 listeners.
Nice. Yes. We're I can see the viewers. We're a little bit above 20, but yeah. So any last thoughts, Justin, before we end this? I guess I can try to look up what sort of questions we got.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Cool. So for you, Justin, particularly, regarding the projections, are the minutes and usage projections based off their season averages so far, or is it something you manually put in, or kind of how do you get to those numbers?
Yeah, so minutes are manually done every night. I go through every single player on every single team that's playing that night, and I look at their minutes. I factor in the spread, matchups, like if they're playing a team that necessitates them going bigger or smaller. So all the stuff with the minutes are done manually, and the usage is kind of the same. Like I'll go through field goal attempts and I'll do a comparison of like season and projected usage just to kind of see if guys I'm missing on. But just like I'd say like 95% of the projection process is done manually.
Okay. Gotcha. And as far as like stats go or anything, or do you wait? Like how do you deal with like season long stuff versus like recency stuff?
Yeah. I think
that was another question. Sorry.
Okay. I think with things like shooting percentages, I'm more on the bigger sample size.
Yeah.
With regressions to the mean, I think that happens. I think if a guy gets a string of bad matchups to start the season that kind of lower his shooting percentages lower than you would think, they're bound to regress if the matchups kind of normalize and he gets better spots. Things like usage, I think, are very like team and context dependent, so that's more recent. So Kevin Love, for example, him going to 25.6% usage percentage this season is something that it's not fluky. It's something that you need to be factoring in right now.
Yeah.
But like, your rate stats, assuming like I said, it's context dependent. Like if the team is stable, most players are there from last year, nothing really changes, then I'm more all about like the season long, the big sample, the longer term view. But if things are in kind of like a moving state, new players, new system, new adjustments, then you got to pay a lot more attention to like what's going on right now.
Agreed. Yep. Sounds great to me. I agree on what you said for sure. So it looks like kind of the rest of the questions we got some questions about strategy stuff and contrarian, but we'll kind of get to that in later pods. And it looks like the other ones are kind of player specific that we've answered already, kind of as we went on. So good with me. Any last words, Justin? Or you ready to call it, and we'll get back on Tuesday night for the Wednesday slate.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks for hanging with us, and we'll see you on Tuesday.
Yep. So again, we're doing Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday videos like this, and they will be in podcast form as well. So I'm going to edit them right after and get those up so you can iTunes, Stitcher, whatever you prefer. And then we'll have those short videos that we'll announce to you that we're going to do on Twitch, and we'll get that all out to you. So thanks again for watching, and good luck tomorrow, and we'll see you guys on Tuesday.
Thanks, guys.